The hot midday sun casts a golden glow over the old wooden roofs of Tombstone. A slow panorama sweeps across the town, a light wind whipping up fine dust that floats low to the ground. Dry grass stretches across the ground, rolling slowly under the quiet horizon. The town was once famous for its bloodshed, but now it looks like a quiet western painting, seemingly having forgotten the war behind it. People go in and out of the grocery store. Soft laughter echoes from the small saloon. From inside the saloon, fiddle music plays softly, a sad but pleasant tune. Wyatt Earp, now in his 50s, rode leisurely down the main street. He wore a long coat, his hat pulled down over half his face, a dignified figure, his eyes scanning every familiar corner. Behind him was Virgil, older, with a grey beard, but his eyes still sharp. They nodded to the people, and a few children ran across the street, waving and calling out. "Hello, Mr. Wyatt. Did you shoot anyone today?" Virgil smiled and shook his head. Wyatt just smiled faintly, not answering. They stopped in front of the sheriff's office. They took off their guns and set them gently on the table. Wyatt poured water from the old pitcher and drank, glancing out the window. Nothing remarkable, but his eyes were fixed on the dusty road in the distance. Virgil slapped the back of his chair and sighed. Virgil, it's unusually quiet today, almost suspicious." Wyatt put down his glass, not smiling. "Wyatt," in a low voice, "I heard someone say, when the weather is too calm, a storm is coming." Virgil chuckled. Virgil, I like storms better. At least they tell you where to hide. Calm doesn't." At the same time, the wind suddenly picked up. Dry leaves swirled and fell. A black crow landed on the roof near the OK Corral and let out a creepy caw. The camera zoomed in on the monument, where the names Wyatt Earp and Virgil Earp were carved in white stone. At the base of the statue, the distant silhouette of a stagecoach approached. Each wheel screeched as it scraped the ground, tearing apart the false piece of Tombstone. Tombstone Main Street, noon. The carriage wheels rolled slowly down the dusty road. The old coachman nodded, his hands loosening the reins. The carriage stopped in front of the Dry Bone Saloon. No one called out. No one got out right away. The residents standing around the porch of the drugstore, the blacksmith shop and the saloon suddenly fell silent. All eyes turned to the open door of the carriage. Black boots, caked with desert soil, stomped on the pavement. A tall, thin figure, wearing a long, wind-faded coat, stepped out. He pulled the brim of his hat down over his eyes. His left hand carried an old leather bag. His right hand wore a torn black glove. A middle-aged woman muttered, her hand shaking as she pointed at him. "Woman, no way, Clanton. Oh my God, he's dead." The man stopped in the middle of the road, looking up. Jedediah Jed Clanton. A gaunt face, skin ashen, eyes sunken with dull pupils, glowing a pale yellow like a wild animal at night. The wrinkles were deep as if he had died, then risen from the grave. Jed entered the saloon. The wooden door creaked open. The music stopped. The wine glass stopped in midair. There was a leaden silence. An old cowboy sprang to his feet, touched his gun, and choked out, "You're Jed Clanton. You had your lungs blown out at the OK Corral. We buried you. I nailed your coffin with my own hands." Jed didn't look at him. He walked slowly to the counter, sat down on a rickety wooden stool, took a dirty dollar from his pocket, and placed it on the table. "Oh, Jed, I hear the booze here is still as strong as ever. I need something to remind me of. Some old faces." The barmaid shakily poured the whiskey, pouring more than usual. Jed lifted the glass, sniffing but not drinking. His hand shook slightly, but his eyes did not blink. Next scene, outside the saloon, Wyatt and Virgil had just arrived. They stopped, looking in through the dusty window. Wyatt frowned. Virgil. That's him? No way. He couldn't have survived that shot. Wyatt didn't answer right away. The wind blew by, making the OK Corral, where Legends End sign rattle. I'll say, Wyatt, you saw him die, and I saw those eyes never really closed. Jed stood in front of the OK Corral memorial. The wind blew hard, the dust flying up, obscuring Wyatt's name. Jed touched the rock lightly and whispered. Jed, in a deep voice as if from underground. I'm back, Herb. And this time, not to shoot, but to dig graves. Tombstone Police Department. Sunlight slanted through the windows, dust floating in the yellow light. Wyatt sat behind his desk, chin propped in his hands, staring at the cold 45-inch front of him. Virgil paced back and forth behind him, looking uneasy. Virgil, you said he was Clanton? He should be rotting in Boot Hill Cemetery. Wyatt didn't answer right away. He stood quietly, walked to the cabinet, and pulled out an old yellowed file. The cover labeled, OK Coral, Shooting, Tombstone Police Department. Sunlight slanted through the windows, dust floating in the yellow light. Wyatt sat behind his desk, chin propped in his hands, staring at the Colt 45-inch front of him. Virgil paced back and forth behind him, looking uneasy. Virgil, you said he was Clanton? He should be rotting in Boot Hill Cemetery. Wyatt didn't answer right away. He stood quietly, walked to the cabinet, and pulled out an old yellowed file. The cover labeled, OK Coral, Shooting, OK Corral Shootout Dusk. The air vibrates with gunfire, screams, the clatter of hooves, smoke billows, bullets whiz by. Slow motion. Virgil is shot in the arm. Doc Holliday shoots Billy Clanton, and Jed is shot in the chest, falling to the ground in a pool of blood. He's barely alive. Vision blurs, then cuts to the night sky. Arizona desert, midnight. Jed lies in the sand, his body motionless, dried blood smeared on his chest and neck. A dim moon hangs overhead. No wind, nothing but deathly silence. Then, a creaking of chains echoes from the darkness. A shadow appears in the distance. A cloaked figure, his face hidden by a black cloth, walking slowly toward Jed. The man in black kneels, whispering in Jed's ear in an unknown language. The blood on Jed's chest began to flow again. His eyes were wide, glassy. Whisper, abnormal, repetitive. Blood not paid, hatred not slept. You will rise. Jed hissed, his hands shaking against the sand, his body hunched like a zombie waking up after days of burial. A strange wind blew across the desert. The dry grass flipped over. The police office. Wyatt lit a cigarette, took a long drag. The light reflected in his eyes, full of doubt and fear. Wyatt, speaking softly almost to himself. If he hadn't died that day, he wouldn't be human anymore. Virgil walked slowly to the window, pulled back the curtains and looked out onto the main road. Oh, Virgil, I've never seen eyes like that, Wyatt. Not hate, but emptiness. Wyatt nodded slightly, his eyes fixed on the old photo taken after the gunfight. The photo of him, Virgil, Doc, and a man lying motionless at his feet, but his silhouette was now standing. Tombstone, Central Square, twilight. The evening light dyed the roofs a golden brown. The sun was about to set behind the distant mountains. The town was almost deserted. The wind blew gently, stirring up small dust particles that danced like death on the pavement. In the center of the square, standing still in the wind and dust, was the OK Corral Memorial, a stone statue of three men holding guns, their coats flying. The inscription on the pedestal read, "Honor, Order, Justice." Below, the names of the heroes were carved deeply. Wyatt Earp, Virgil Earp, Doc Holliday. A figure slowly approached. There were no footsteps, only the sound of the wind whistling through the rotten wooden posts. Jed Clanton. He stopped before the statue. His face was dark in the twilight. His hat was pulled low over his forehead, but his eyes were still visible, dull, deep, and empty as cold stone. He looked up at the statue as if he were facing a demon standing on stone. "Jed, you are cast in stone, and my brother's blood is turned to earth." He touched the engraving of the name Wyatt Earp, cold, solid, like touching a tomb. "Jed, honor, order, justice. I see lies, shots in the back, victory written in the blood of the loser." The wind began to pick up. Dry leaves swirled around his feet. A howl or something else came from behind the monument. Jed closed his eyes. He put 2 fingers to his forehead, as if listening to a voice from another world. "Oh, Jed, we buried ourselves in the sand, but the earth remembers. The blood remembers. I come back, not alone." The camera moved from behind Jed, slowly pulling toward the statue. In the darkness pouring out from the statue, there seemed to be another figure standing next to him. No face, no specific shape. Just a dark area, so deep that the light could not penetrate. Jed turned his head to look at the figure, nodded, as if accepting an order. "Oh, Jed, it starts with blood. It must end with blood." He pulled a rusty bullet from his pocket and placed it at the foot of the statue. The wind stopped. The trees stood still. The space seemed locked in absolute silence. Jed turned and walked away. The camera stayed on the statue, then slowly zoomed in on the bullet at his feet. A small, thread-thin trail of blood began to ooze from the bullet's tip. The stables behind town. Late night. A crescent moon hung in the deep purple sky, peeking out from behind a thin layer of gunpowder clouds. The night wind was cold. The shrill neighing of horses echoed from the stable at the end of town, where Billy, the young man who tended the horses, was on duty at night. The stables. It was dark inside, lit only by the flickering yellow light from a hanging oil lamp, swaying as the wind blew through the rotten planks. The horses in the stable became unusually agitated, hooves pounding, eyes bulging, breathing heavily, as if smelling something not of this world. Billy, 18 years old, young face, clothes stained with straw, entered, carrying a bucket of water. He grimaced in displeasure at the strange stench, fishy, like the smell of raw meat forgotten in the Sunday. "Billy, hey Reggie, what did you step on? What's got you all so scared?" The biggest stallion yelled, jerking at the reins, his eyes bloodshot. Billy frowned, moving toward the back of the stable. The kerosene lamp swayed wildly. The wind blew coldly. The ropes creaked a strange yet familiar sound, like something from a nightmare fairy tale. "Billy, is someone in there?" Silence. Billy raised the kerosene lamp higher, the swaying light illuminating the deepest darkness of the stable. A body, hanging upside down from a wooden beam. The legs were tied with braided rope, the head bowed, the hair disheveled, blood dripping onto the dry straw. The face was half cut off, the eyes rolled back. A word scrawled in blood on the wooden wall behind. "Unpaid blood debt." Billy screamed. but his voice caught in his throat. His hand shook as he dropped the lamp. It broke. The fire caught the straw, flickering. For a moment the light flickered, and there was a figure standing behind the body. A figure. No face, no clear shape, but it stood. It looked at Billy. The next morning, the crime scene. Wyatt and Virgil rode up. The stables were roped off, and the villagers were in an uproar. Billy's body was laid on a stretcher, covered with a cloth. Wyatt pulled back the cloth and saw the dried red blood on his chest. Virgil looked up at the blood on the wall, speechless. Virgil, whispering, "The Clanton's way of killing." Wyatt said nothing. His hand tightened on the hilt of his gun. Wyatt, whispering almost to himself. He wasn't human anymore.